So when I started out doing this, like Armin was making guides, they were about $300 for a single tooth guide. And again, I'm in a podunk area, no one can afford this stuff. And so as much as I saw the value, I couldn't pass that along to my patients. So it was just coming out of my bottom line, basically. And that's kind of why I started. I was not a tech guy at all, but I learned that there was this free software out there that you could make your own guide, and it sucked at the time. I mean, it was a nightmare, and it took an hour to do it, but I'm cheap, so I did it. And I pushed through that learning curve and learned to use Blue Sky Plan, and then that kind of started this snowball of getting into the technology stuff and once I saw that I could design this guide for free and then print it for $1, it's like, oh, game on. Like, I can do this, and then milling, and then designing other things. Like, it just really snowballed. All right, I'm gonna come back to that. But these are just some of the guided kits. One thing I just want to point out is, like, this is Straumann's guided kit. You need a physics degree to be able to read that recipe. I mean, you're placing an implant on number 29, but you got to use the BLRC with the 5mm sleeve height in the H4 position with the 3/5 milling cutter. It's like, what are we talking about with this? This is crazy complex. Built in, it's got keys and everything, which you don't want a keyed guided surgery system. How many of you already have a guided kit? I'm just curious. All right. Is it a keyed one?
Keyless.
Good. All right. Don't let any implant, I don't care if you don't buy Blue Sky implants, but do not let some implant rep talk you into a keyed guided surgery kit. They're a nightmare. That's the Astra kit. It's a mere $12,000. And if I know for a fact, if I use that kit in my office, 3 of those keys are gone the first time we use it. They're in the trash. We're never finding them again. But, a kit cost comes down to how many parts are there in it, how much tolerance and machining is it to make those. So when you get a kit that's got that many drills and that many handles and all this stuff, like, you're going to pay for it. Like, it's really complex. This Nobel kit I kid you not, there's a 45mm drill in that kit. And I borrowed this picture from Armin. He's doing an edentulous arch. The patient is sedated. The anesthetist is cranking them open like an alligator, and he still can't get his drill up and over to drop in the hole. Like, that, it's clear that a lot of these were made by very smart engineers that have never had their fingers in someone's mouth, right? So bear that in mind. When you're looking for a kit, it needs to be a keyless kit. And we'll talk more about that, but think something along the lines of up on the upper right. That was the original one, that was cam logs, but the part that you got is that cylindrical portion. It's built into the drill, and then you have the business end below that. That's what you're looking for. All right, so this was my little podunk practice. Again, it was a very rural area, and I love this picture because if you looked across the corner from my office, this is in the front yard. Do y'all know what that is? Yeah, it's a local Winchester daycare. Because, honestly, if you're going to do the devil's dandruff all afternoon, you got to do something with your kids, So throw them in there. They don't run out the street. You can get hopped up on whatever. But, yeah, I just think that's hilarious. And we were voted the 3rd most redneck city in Tennessee.
You should be proud of that.
I am proud of that. All right. So how much should guided surgery cost? Right now, I should update this because one of the answers is nothing. All right. So Gene will talk more about this, but one of the nice things that Blue Sky started offering is if you purchase a Blue Sky implant, they'll do the guide for free. So if you, at the end of this weekend, decide, I don't want to do all this computer stuff and planning and all that, like, they'll do it for you. They'll print it for you, and the only thing you pay is the shipping, which is like $4 or $5, right? So, but that's only with Blue Sky implants, right? And then isn't there free crown design as well? So, man, you can start getting the cost on this stuff really, really low. But I'm the guy that likes to do it all myself. I don't like to hand it off to someone. Now, they do a good job planning it. They'll send you the images, you can critique it, make changes, whatever, and then once you've given it the seal of approval, they'll print it and send it to you. But I like to do it myself. So the way Blue Sky Plan works is the software is free. You can all download it right now. You can use it. You can practice all you want. But the way the business model is like, if I've designed a guide, that's really of no use to me unless I've exported it where I can now print it, right? So they charge basically a per case fee to export that. And so those exports, you just buy them from the website, they're tracked in your software, and so you design a guide, it'll say this will deduct one export, you want to proceed, yes, and now you own that file, right? That's kind of how it works. Same with dentures, same with clear aligner, ortho, all the stuff in Blue Sky works on those exports. Now there's a lot of stuff in Blue Sky Plan that's just totally free. Model work, crown design, wax ups, that kind of stuff. But the rest of it would work on these exports. And they're going to vary in price. Our 20 is a nice round number, but if you buy more, they're cheaper. You buy like 5 at a time, they're a little more expensive. So anyway, the cost for me to do a guided surgery is the cost of that export, which again, I would buy them in higher volume, but let's just say 20 to make it a round number. It's going to take about 5 milliliters of resin. That's about 50 cents. All right, it doesn't take a lot of resin to make one of these. And then the guide tube is kind of negotiable. Again, this is an old slide, but nowadays I'm using, I was working with a keyless kit. And with a keyless kit, there's not any cutting surface that comes in contact with that guide. So you don't really have to worry about needing metal in there to prevent generating shavings and that kind of stuff. Like it's just a smooth surface in contact with the plastic smooth surface. So honestly, I don't use the plastic or the metal sleeves anymore. I just go with the plastic. But if you do buy the tube, it's $7 if you prefer to have metal in there. So, your total cost here is under $30 to do that. And again, just a few short years ago, it was like $300 for a single tooth case. And, how much time is it going to take you? Again, Gene's going to show you a lot of the new things. When I started out, it was going to take you an hour to plan this. Now, all of these AI features, AI generated wax up. The software now is planning the implant for you, right? And it's not quite to the point where I never touch it, but it will get there, right? That's the nature of AI, is it's constantly feeding back on the cases as they're done and refining that, based on what it gets back. So there's going to come a point where basically you say, hey, we need a plan for number 29, and it just does everything, gives you a finished plan, and you just kind of look at it and say, looks great. And you punch the button again, and your guides and reports and all that are done. Like, that's where it's going to. But despite that, right now, like for me, once you just know your way around the software on a basic case, it's 5 to 7 minutes, I'd say, which you ought to be spending at least that long looking at it in your CT software planning anyway, right? So chances are, if you're placing implants and you're already using a CT, like you're already doing 70% of this process. You're only a couple of clicks away from having a guide. It's just doing it in a different software than your CT scanner software. So again, this is like included with Blue Sky implants. All right. Takes too much time. Again, I just addressed that. Like, it used to. It doesn't anymore. Now, if you want to get into a complex full arch, you want to get real fancy and do, a stackable guide, something like this. Like, okay, I'll grant you that's going to be a lot bigger investment in time, but the vast majority of cases don't need this. Like, that's way overkill for most things. Get too far from my mouse. Forgot a clicker. All right. So again, you're already doing most of this process. If you have a CT, again, you're already taking that. You've probably taken intraoral scans, so you've already got that. I would bet you're opening it up. You're maybe sticking a virtual implant in there, trying to gauge the bone and all that, but without the advantage of having like a crown or anything to plant it off of. Like, you're already doing most of this. Just don't bother doing it in your Planmeca software or Sirona software, whatever it is. Just export that DICOM from your CT and just open it in Blue Sky and do all that stuff there, because again, you're only a few clicks away from having the guide. So I mentioned this is kind of the, great, thank you. This is kind of the basics of what you've got to have to be able to do a guided surgery. You've got to have the CT scan, right? Doesn't mean you got to be the one that owns it, but you got to be able to get it. And then you need an STL model. Now, how many of you have an intraoral scanner? Just curious. Okay, so most of you do, so it's not a big issue. But just so you know, you've got other options. There's lab scanners, right? They're really inexpensive. You could get one of those. Any of your labs have a lab scanner, so if you have a stone model, you could have that scanned there. But another thing a lot of people don't know is if you've just got a stone model or even just a PBS impression of that arch, you can actually CT scan that, and Blue Sky will turn that into the STL model. So all of those are an option. But these are the basics of what we're going to need. So the way the process is going to work, and I'll work through some cases just to kind of show you how this all works. But you're going to open up the CT scan. The software now auto stitches it. So when I'm talking about stitching, do you have a laser? Well, it didn't show up on that. When I'm talking about stitching, right, your intraoral scan has to come in and it has to be matched up to that CT scan. And that's the absolute most critical step in this. And, you know, historically when I would teach these guided surgery courses, it would be 2 days, and man, we would spend 25% of that course just getting people to grasp how to stitch it correctly because it was all manual. And it's such a critical step that if you proceed forward and it's in the wrong position, like you're guaranteeing a bad result. So we would spend so much time on that, and it could be really difficult. And man, again, with the AI improvements, now it's like literally tell it it's either a maxilla or a mandible, and it stitches it. It won't 100% of the time work. All right, so what scenarios can you imagine where it's going to struggle to get an automatic stitch?
Edentulous?
Yeah, for a different reason, but yes, the edentulous you got to approach a little differently. But if it's a dentate case, the number one reason, well, there's two reasons why you would potentially get a bad stitch. One is scatter, all right? So if you've seen many CT scans, when it comes across metal or zirconia, it just looks like a bunch of garbage, right? So there's not really a bad one on there, but you'll see some scans that we'll go through today. If it's a zirconia crown, it just looks like a big blob, right? That's inherent to CT technology. We can't avoid scatter. EBAC shows up good, composite shows up good, a lot of acrylics show up good, but metals and zirconia are going to just be rough. They're not going to show anything. So what ends up happening is the software just can't find common points of data because all the teeth are kind of blobbed together with all that scatter. So you kind of have to take a different approach with those. I usually kind of use the general rule, if I've got a couple of virgin teeth per quadrant, we'll be able to get a good stitch. If I don't have any virgin teeth in the arch, or maybe only on one side, I'm probably going to take a different approach with those, but thankfully that's not most of the cases you're going to be dealing with. All right, so once we've got that good stitch, let me back up. Let's say this, so when I'm talking about the stitch, right, that's the intraoral scan, and that green outline is it, and you see how it's tracking right along on everything? So hypothetically, let's say that it missed it, or you manually stitched it, and it's 5 millimeters off here to the right, all right, and you don't catch that, and you proceed with your planning, you design a guide, you print it, now you're in surgery. Is that guide going to fit? It's going to fit like a glove, is the problem, but it's going to put your implant way off, because you'll see as you go in this process, it assumes that model, you verify that it's in the right position. And so as you move along in the process, now the implant's planned based on the CT, but all it's doing is it's building a guide on that intraoral scan. And like I said, it'll fit like a glove. But if that match is incorrect, it's going to be just way off in its position. So really critical that you grasp that, and I'll try to talk through how you evaluate for a good stitch. It's really easy once you kind of know what I'm talking about. Again, we always want to start from the prosthetic end in mind, so I always do a wax up. Again, this used to be a thing. You'd add teeth, you'd manually stretch them and do all this kind of stuff, and now it's a one button click, and it's going to plan that tooth for you. And if you've got an opposing arch, it'll build it into occlusion. Like it's getting too easy. I'm about to not be able to charge as much for courses because it's getting too easy. All right, and now we can plan the implant backwards from the prosthetic position, right? So yeah, it's a lot of bone, but there's a lot of places that implant could go, and I really want it to be coming right out the middle of that occlusal surface, right in the central groove if possible. So having that prosthetic outline there now lets me plan this more adequately. All right, and then the last step And again, all this, there's two modes in Blue Sky Plan. There's what's called the Wizard, where it's kind of an automated thing, and it's going to step you through. So like your onesie, twosie cases, as you're beginning, use the Wizard. It's kind of dummy proof. As you get more comfortable in the software, like where I'm at, I mean, I never use the Wizard because I can just fly through it in advanced mode, and I can do a lot of more complex things in advanced mode. So I'll try to show you both just so you have something to contrast. And again, I've got YouTube tutorials going through both of those. But you would draw your guide outline and then build your guide. And again, this is what it would generate. The guide tube is based on what kit you're telling it you're using, or using a BioHorizons kit, the Blue Sky kit, the Nobel kit, whatever. They're all in there if you are using something else. But it will generate that guide, and again, everything's free to this point. But until I can get that file out and send it to my printer, it's kind of no use to me. So that's where those exports come in. So I'll go through with you how to export. Did you talk to him, Gene, about getting some freebies?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys are gonna get freebies
Yeah.
today.
Usually for any kind of training course that we do, if you haven't already downloaded Blue Sky Plan, go ahead and download it. And then we'll give you the information of who to email. They'll send you some freebie exports, like 7 or 8 of them, just so that you have some to burn and can practice with this stuff and kind of learn without it costing you anything.
And the beauty about the exports is it's per case, it's not per arch. So if you're like doing 2
Yeah.
arches, it's per case. So you get both arches for one download.
Yeah, or if I looked at it, I've exported it and now it's 3 months later and the treatment plan has changed. If I reopen that case, it's already been exported from it. So even if I change something now, that case has been paid for. You can export as many more times from it as you want.
The crown's included, whatever you choose to do is included.
The owners of Blue Sky are not dummies. Like they primarily make their money from implants, not the software. I mean, it's the largest dental used software in the world, but there's so much money that constantly has to get dumped back into it for programming and all that kind of stuff, that it's not the big money maker. Like they want you to buy the implants, so they try to throw as many incentives into doing that as possible. The free crowns, the free planning, the guides, all that kind of stuff. All right, so this is a video, and again, this is a little bit older. This has not even got some of the new AI features, but I'm just going to time lapse it just so you can see big picture what's going on here. So I'm pulling in the CT. It automatically maps the nerves, and now we're putting in the STL. And whereas I used to have to manually stitch all that, it just does it. All right, there's the crown. This step is automated now, both the implant placement and the tooth design. I draw the outline of the guide. That's automated now. There's my drill report. It will add the parts to your card if you're using a Blue Sky implant, right? So again, don't expect that you're going to do your first case in 4 minutes, right? It's just not realistic. I just have been doing it a long time, so it's just, I know where to go. It's fast. I mean, once you have done a handful of cases, this shouldn't take you that long. Again, full arches, more complex stuff, sure, it's going to take a little longer, but it shouldn't be taking you all day to do this kind of thing. All right, so kind of the whole argument with these guides is you are going to get greater accuracy. This was a big one for me. Is like I just noticed my procedure times dropped dramatically. We kind of, for any single implant, we would book an hour, and usually if you gave me an hour, I'd use an hour. I'd be dinking honest and just, put 97 sutures or whatever, just waste my time, But once I started using that guide, I was like, holy crap. I mean, we were routinely done, like sutured and done in like 12 minutes. And, that translated to more on the bottom line because we cut procedure times. Fewer chances of mistakes. Listen, you can still screw it up. You will absolutely still be able to screw the pooch if you want to. But you got to try harder to really screw it up. All right? Just some basic things you really just need to think about. If I told you that the literature shows an increase in failures with new guided users, what do you think that would be caused from? It's heat. All right. So think about it. If you've done a freehand implant, right, you're going so slow. You go a millimeter, take a check film. You go another millimeter, take a check film, right? You're going so slow because you're controlling everything. You're so scared you're getting off track, right? And so you're going slow and easy. There's a problem, if you're not aware of it, with using a guide in that, man, if you want to, you could take your final drill and just, and we did a hands-on course last week, and I was watching these people do it, and that's exactly what they did. They never let off the gas. It was just, smoke coming out of the model and all kinds of stuff. Like, you can't do that, right? You still got to think biologically. One thing a guide does do is it restricts how much of your irrigation is getting to that surgical site, right? Because it's kind of covering that area. So I really stress to people, like, it's going to be so tempting for you to just go hog wild and do this as fast as possible, but don't. Go a millimeter or two. Get all the way out of that hole with your drill so that irrigation's getting into it, cooling things down. Go another millimeter or two, get all the way out. Another millimeter or two, all the way out, right? Just go slow and easy, because even doing that, you're going to be done in a fraction of the time. This is a little more advanced, but if you get to the point where you start doing immediate load restorations or like immediate load full arch, like, it dramatically speeds that up, because the conversion, like the prosthetic part of that, usually takes quite a bit longer than surgery. And if you can have all that ahead of time, that just saves you a load of time. My stress level went way down doing these guided surgeries. For the longest time, I was still taking check films of every drill, and at some point I was like, what am I doing here? Like, it's going to the right position. As long as I didn't screw up the planning aspect, the drill's going to the right position. I don't have to take all these check films. You make prosthetics before surgery, and again, it is going to reduce the learning curve and remove a lot of the guesswork. All right, so let's talk about implants for a minute. Again, there's 400 something implants on the market, and most of them work well. There's very few that I would say are bad implants. All right, so I do a lot with Blue Sky. They've been incredibly good to me, and I'm going to show all the advantages. It's what I used in my practice when I was still practicing, but you can take a lot of these principles and apply them to whatever implant. But there's a lot of reasons I chose Blue Sky. I started out, I was trained Zimmer. They wanted 400 an implant back in 2008 when I got out, and I was like, that's insane. And so I went with Implant Direct because they had a Zimmer clone basically, and had good success with that. Eventually I kind of saw the value in a conical connection, which we'll talk about, and so they didn't have an option for that. So I started looking around, found Blue Sky through Dental Town, called up the company. I was like, hey, I just wanted some more information about this, and asked a technical question. They were like, you know what, let me just let you talk to the owner real quick. And they patched me through to the owner, one of the owners, Sheldon, who's a periodontist, and he happened to be in Israel at the time. Picks up the phone and proceeds to talk to me for like 40 minutes about implant design and all this crazy stuff. I was like, holy cow, that's amazing. I could get the owner on the phone. But after that conversation, I was kind of sold. I understood the value in it. All that to say, Blue Sky's got a lot of different implant lines, right? There's the zygomatic implants, which I don't think anyone's probably at that level in this room. I'm not at that level. I can plan them for others, but I wouldn't tackle that surgery. Pterygoids are probably, for down the road. But, all these others, except for our TAD orthodontic ones, are implants that are compatible to other major brands, right? So when Blue Sky started, everybody was all about those Straumann tissue level implants, right? And that was the thing back in the day, and everybody jumped on board with that. And then, they just started adding lines. So if you like an internal hex style connection comparable to like Zimmer, Implant Direct, BioHorizons, that would be the internal hex. If you like the Straumann style connection, that would be the Quattro. If you like the Straumann tissue level, that's the one stage. The trilobe, don't do, that's the Nobel trilobe, but no one uses that anymore. It's not a great connection. I think it's only on the website because there's a couple of old school guys that just, as soon as they buy all the stock, that one's gone. For full arches, we do have what's called the Multi-One, which is a one-piece implant that has a multi-unit built into it. So if you're doing full arches, like that can save you a lot of money on the prosthetics. But If you were asking me like which of these lines to consider, I'd be looking top left at the BioMax and the BioForte. All right, so we'll go through why, but all of the implants have an active floor surface. It's fluoride modified surface. Loads of research on it. It's well established in the implant literature as a great surface. Fluoride selectively binds to bone better than the calcium does, right? So faster integration, all that kind of stuff. So when you're considering what kind of implant, some of you are kind of early on in this journey. You might not even have picked an implant system yet. Like, this is the stuff I would be looking for if I was looking for an implant today. So aggressive threading, that's going to be really good in soft bone. Anytime you do an immediate, anywhere you need to get a lot of grab, right? You want to have aggressive threading. Platform switching. So what do I mean by platform switching? You've probably all seen like maybe an old Nobel replace or a Nobel tri-load, right? Where here's the top of the implant and the abutment comes straight off the edge of that, right? And usually when you see that it loses about 1 millimeter or 2 of bone around the collar of that. And used to, that was just the expected thing. We're going to lose that bone. What we know is that a lot of that comes down to the micro gap that's formed at the abutment to the implant interface. And so I don't have a board to look at here, but I'll draw you a picture, but we'll see it in something later here. But when I say a platform switch, what I mean is that the outer diameter of the implant is out here, your abutment emerges from in here. All right, so that connection part, you've gotten it away from the bone, right? It's coming out from more centrally located, which is, again, well established to preserve bone better. And then a conical connection is a big one. That's kind of why I was looking for a different system. It's because I was placing all these Zimmers and internal hexes from Implant Direct, and it just never failed. After a year or two, I'd have 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters of bone loss. And it was just the accepted thing. Anyone restored one of those lately? Or BioHorizons?
Mm-hmm.
What did it smell like when you took the healing abutment off?
God. They'll say, "What's happening in
Yeah.
here?" That's what they say.
Yeah, it stinks to
Ooh,
high
that
heaven.
smells, yeah.
And why is that? Any ideas?
Leak.
It's leakage at the abutment to implant interface. Those are wobbly connections. They're not a conical connection. So when I say conical, think of two coffee cups, right? You pick up one, and even though you're not holding the 4 below it, they all come out with it, right? They're kind of cold welded. That's a bad example because they're coffee cups, but that's the idea with it. Whereas when you look at, say, even our internal hex, this is the case, right? Internal hex, you're going to have a square 90-degree angle coming out, right? And what we know is those move, and it's not just ours, it's everybody's that has any non-conical connection this applies to, Trilobes, whatever, Straumann's, it doesn't matter. That thing moves, and as it does, there's bacteria and fluids seeping into these cavities, and there's nowhere for it to go. So it just gets funky and it's kind of septic in there. And so we wonder why do we consistently get bone loss down to the first or second thread? Well, what happens if you put a big funky amalgam overhang that's constantly got plaque around it right near the bone level? What's it do? The body reestablishes a biologic width by losing bone away from that, right? It's the exact same principle. You got bacterial sepsis here, the bone's retreating away from that to a point where it can stabilize itself and maintain at that level. So if you deal with a conical connection, again, think of that wedging effect, that gets cold welded. So again, ours or anyone else's, if you're using a conical, when you take healing abutments off, there's no smell with it, there's no nothing, because there's nothing getting in there. I probably won't play this whole thing, but this is worth watching. If you look up a guy named Ziprich, he's a professor at University of Frankfurt, I think, but he was a hired gun for Astra. Astra paid him a bunch to do research on their implants, which at the time were conical connections. But the principle is still the same. So what he did is he got all these different brands of implants and different connection types, and he would get on it with a scanning electron microscope and apply a lateral load and then just watch, see what happens. All right, so this, I think, is a non-conical.
Now we have a closer look at it, and in the overview we can see that there is a micro gap inside of the 5mm implant.
See the
And
lateral
if we have a
force?
closer look at it, we can clearly see that there is a micro gap and also
Every
there's a
time you
micro gap
chew.
before. So the manufacturing tolerances in
When
the
that opens
system
up, it's
are not
sucking
really
fluid
perfect.
and bacteria from the mouth.
If we compare this with a 4mm implant, it's clearly to see that the micro gap increase, and also at the enlargement we can see that there is a really large micro gap. But if we compare
so that's
this with a
why
platform
they
switch
stink.
solution, we will see that in the overview it's really hard to find the micro gap. But if we go to the enlargement, we can see that there is a micro gap, but it is really
So this is a
very,
platform
the
switch.
micro gap is really very small.
But your
So
bone's
what
out
is the
here,
reason for
so
this?
you've automatically
The
put
reason
that
for this
harder
are
away.
elastic deformation of the
Right.
implant components,
Now-
not only inside of the binding screw.
Let's go to the next one here. Come on. Go to the next slide.
That there is a really elastic deformation.
Here we go. All right, so this, again, and this is an Astra.
And
But
also
this is
the
a
detailed
convection.
recording could show that there is no micro gap inside. And this is based on a good manufacturing tolerances and a good dimension of or design of the corneal interface. The same with the angular system, we also see no micro gaps inside. But there are some,
All right, so
and
the point
also
of
the
that
detailed.
is, basically, with a conical connection, you put that load on it, there's no gap that opens up. It almost flexes as an entire unit, right? So you're not getting that bacterial pumping fluid, which doesn't get the bone loss. So it's not uncommon, like if I was placing a Biomax, like what I was placing when I was still practicing, I sometimes put them 2mm subcrestal and not expect to get bone loss. Whereas if I did that with like the internal hexes I used to use, like that's a bad deal. Like I'm gonna probably get cratering around that and bone loss down to the first thread. So all that to say, if I was looking at one of the Blue Sky implant lines, I'd be looking at the Biomax and the Bioforte. They're the same connection. All right, so you could use these interchangeably. The only difference is the Forte is kind of the more aggressive threading that I'd use like in soft bone, immediates, posterior maxilla, that kind of stuff. Everywhere else, I'd probably just use the Biomax. But again, it's a single prosthetic platform on all of it. It's compatible to the Nobel Active narrow platform. And usually most lectures, someone will, if they've used Nobel Active, they'd say, well, you can't use that everywhere in the mouth. Nobel says you can't use narrow platform in the posterior. And that's true if you're using Nobel, all right? So the reason I put up here that it's not a clone, it's a compatible connection. So one of the things that the owners did is when they decided to go with that connection, they made a couple little tweaks on some angles where the flexure occurred. And just those little tweaks, they still kept all the compatibility, but it doubled the strength of that abutment implant interface, which is great because now that means you can use it all throughout the mouth. And so thinking from an inventory standpoint, when I used to place like Legacy, it had 4 different platforms for that Legacy line, which means I got to stock 3mm and 5mm healing abutments in 4 different platforms. I have to stock impression transfers for 4 different platforms, tie bases for 4 different platforms, right? So inventory just got to be a nightmare, whereas if I've got one universal connection, like everything fits everywhere. So it really simplified things a lot for me. And again, that's just the difference in those Biomax versus the Fortes. And there is a regular platform, and I'll be real honest, we only made it because there was a couple of oral surgeons that just couldn't wrap their mind around it and insisted you just have to have a regular platform. So we made it for them, and we sold like 14 in 4 years. So don't use the regular platform. All right, this is interesting, and this will explain why. These are both 4-3 implants. left is a neuro platform, right is a regular platform. Which one is stronger? If you can get this right, you're smarter than those two oral surgeons. All right, so you might automatically think regular platform, right? And that's what they were thinking. They just couldn't get their mind around it. But, you know, as part of FDA, like you have to test this stuff until it fails. Like they go on these stress machines and just get cycled over and over until something breaks. And what we know is it's not going to be the abutment that breaks. It'll be the implant flowering. So again, we've got a 4-3 implant. How do we put a fatter abutment connection into that 4-3 implant?
Take it away from you.
You're thinning the walls out, which was already the weakest link. So it's better to use that narrow platform, all right? Nobel's doesn't just because their abutment is too weak, right? But that's not the case here. So I just don't want you to think it's a across-the-board clone. And then again, inventory control, like again, in my low podunk practice, I'm constantly thinking about inventory and always having stock and all that kind of stuff. So we only stock 5 sizes of implants in my office. And that was a 3.5 by 10, a 4.3 by 8 and 10, and a 5.0 by 8 and 10. And that was it. And I buy them 5 at a time because you get a discount when you buy them in bulk like that. But that's always stocked in the office because that is all you need for the vast majority of cases in healed sites. The only time I would go with something outside of that, maybe if I'm doing an immediate, I need a longer one to grab more bone at the apex. Or I'm doing a full arch where you're going to immediate load and you got to think more like a woodworker and anchorage. But if you're just putting healing abutments on things, there's really no value in going beyond a 10 millimeter implant. I mean, this is a bunch of Mish's classic studies. They would do this, forget what they call it, but it shows stress around implants. You could put a 16 in, and by the 8 millimeter mark, nothing else is taking any stress below that, right? So you've just got 8 millimeters doing all the work and 8 millimeters that raised your blood pressure during that procedure. So what is the point? I mean, who are we trying to impress here? So if you're two-staging things, you're putting on a healing abutment, like there's really not a need to go bigger than a 10 millimeter implant. All right, so it is important to know like the surface area is more important than absolute lengths or anything. So I used like these 5 by 6 millimeter implants all the time, like if I had limited space above the mandibular canal, because that's a huge amount of surface area. Basically for every 1 millimeter increase in diameter, it's about the equivalent of having a 3 millimeter long implant. So again, surface area is what matters. So if you've got tons of bone and you can put a 4.3 or a 5.0 in there, well, don't go putting in a 3.5, right? Put what the site will accept up to a point. You don't want to push it and have real thin buccal bone on it. But that's what is more important. And I learned this the hard way because like the worst thing that can happen to an implant is not that it fails to integrate. Like that sucks, but so what? We unscrew it, we try again, right? Or you refund, do a bridge, whatever. The worst thing that happened, I found, is that you either get peri-implantitis or you get a screw fracture, or worst of all, an implant fracture. Like, how do you deal with that? And this was the case I learned that on. For no reason at all, I placed a 16 millimeter implant. This was freehand. It's a little off angle. But what ended up happening is he started breaking screws. And once he messed up the internal threading in this was an implant direct. It was every 4 or 5 months he'd break another. And I'd buy these screw retrieval kits and everything, and thank God I retired before I had to do another one. But at some point, someone's got to go in and retrieve this thing, and it's halfway to his scalp. I mean, getting this out is going to be an absolute nightmare. It's a 16 millimeter implant. It's going to look like a bomb went off there. And it is what it is, Trefine it, whatever you've got to do. Like with a 10 millimeter implant, it's going to hold up to any occlusal forces. But in the worst case scenario, you have to remove one. They make reverse torquing tools that you can like reverse torque 300 Newton centimeters on an implant and basically unscrew it and leave a site that's just the size of that implant. So it's a lot less traumatic. So I always try to think through like what are worst case scenarios that we can plan for on this.